On an autumn afternoon in New Jersey, the light entered the upstairs bedroom slowly, passing through heavy curtains and falling across the wooden floor in pale bands. The house had grown unusually quiet. Family members moved softly through the hallway, speaking only when necessary, as though even their voices might disturb the fragile rhythm of the old man breathing beneath the blankets. Outside the gates, reporters waited for news. Inside the room, time seemed to have narrowed into the space between one breath and the next. The man in the bed was Thomas Alva Edison. Though little remained of the figure the public remembered, the powerful shoulders had weakened. The hands that once handled wires, tools, glass tubes, and pages of hurried sketches now rested without movement. His white hair spread across the pillow. Illness had reduced the restless inventor to stillness. Yet something in his face suggested that his mind had not entirely surrendered. He appeared to be listening to a distant sound that no one else could hear. For a moment, his eyes opened. His wife leaned closer, hoping to understand whether he needed water, comfort, or simply another human presence beside him. His voice was faint, almost lost beneath the sound of his breathing. He said that it was very beautiful over there. No one in the room knew what he meant. Perhaps he was seeing a memory. Perhaps he was speaking of a dream. Perhaps the man who had spent his life chasing light had discovered one final brightness beyond the reach of human instruments. Not long afterward, his breathing became slower. Then the room grew completely still. The man who had helped cities escape the darkness had entered a silence from which no invention could call him back. Yet death did not close his story. It opened a question. How could a child once considered unable to learn become one of the most recognized inventors in human history? How could a partially deaf boy, raised far from wealth and privilege, leave his fingerprints on the modern world? Before we continue, consider subscribing to the channel for more stories about the people who quietly changed history. These journeys remind us that greatness often begins in places no one thinks to look. When people remember Thomas Edison, they often see the finished image. They imagine the famous laboratory, the glowing bulb, the shelves crowded with machines, and the confident inventor standing before reporters. History prefers complete pictures because complete pictures are easier to admire. It rarely shows the long nights when nothing worked, the empty pockets, the broken equipment, or the private fear that an idea might never become real. Success becomes smooth in memory, even when the life that produced it was anything but smooth. To understand Edison, it is necessary to return to a world that would feel unfamiliar to modern eyes. Night arrived with greater authority then. When the sun disappeared, homes depended on candles, oil lamps, and small fires. Shadows gathered in corners. Streets beyond the center of town often vanished into darkness. Light required flame, and flame required attention. Every illuminated room carried smoke, heat, and the quiet danger of fire. Darkness was not an inconvenience. It was part of the natural order of daily life. Sound was equally temporary. Music existed only while someone played it. A speech survived only in the memory of those who heard it. The voice of a parent, a friend, or a loved one disappeared the moment the speaker fell silent. There were no recordings to preserve laughter, songs, or final words. Moving pictures belonged to fantasy. A human face could be captured in a still photograph, but motion itself remained beyond reach. The world lived entirely in the present because technology had not yet learned how to save time. America, during the middle of the 19th century, was beginning to move faster. Railroads crossed forests and fields. Telegraph wires stretched between distant towns, carrying messages through electrical signals. Factories rose near rivers and cities. The nation was still largely rural, yet the habits of an industrial age were forming. Americans admired invention because invention seemed capable of conquering distance, darkness, and delay. A practical machine could become a national wonder. A useful idea could turn an unknown mechanic into a celebrated public figure. Thomas Alva Edison was born into this changing country In February of 1847, in the small town of Milan, Ohio, his arrival attracted no public attention. There were no signs that history had gained a future legend. He was simply the youngest child in a family that understood uncertainty. Several of his siblings had died young, as many children did in that era. His parents therefore watched him carefully, especially because his unusually large head caused concern among those present at his birth. His father was energetic, ambitious, and rarely satisfied with one occupation for long. He tried different businesses, searching constantly for an opportunity that might bring lasting success. Some ventures earned money, others faded quickly. He possessed the restless spirit of a man who believed the next idea would be better than the last. That same restlessness would later appear in his youngest son, though in a different form. The father chased opportunity through business. The son would chase answers through experiments. His mother, Nancy, carried a quieter kind of strength. She had worked as a teacher and believed deeply in education. Books mattered to her, but confidence mattered even more. She understood that a child could be damaged when curiosity was treated as disobedience. In a time when children were expected to listen, memorize, and remain silent, she valued questions. This belief would become one of the most important forces in the life of her son. Before the world believed in Thomas Edison, his mother did. The town of Milan appeared prosperous during his earliest years. Canals carried grain and goods toward larger markets. Warehouses were busy. Merchants imagined continued growth. Yet progress rarely moves in a straight line. The railroad, which promised speed and national connection, began replacing canal routes. The new tracks passed elsewhere, and the town slowly lost the traffic that had sustained it. Prosperity weakened. Businesses closed. Families who had once believed they were living at the center of opportunity watched the future travel away on distant rails. The Edison family decided to leave. They packed their belongings and moved north to Port Huron, Michigan, where new possibilities seemed more promising. For young Thomas, the move opened a larger world. There were forests to explore, ships moving along the water, machines near the railroad, and adults working with tools he did not yet understand. Every object appeared to contain a secret. Every process raised another question. Why did fire consume wood? How did birds know where to fly? What made machines move? His curiosity was not gentle. He did not simply wonder about things. He tested them. When he wanted to understand how birds kept eggs warm, he attempted to sit on eggs himself. When fire interested him, he reportedly created one and watched the result with more fascination than fear. Adults saw danger and disorder. Thomas saw cause and effect. The world around him was not a finished place to accept quietly. It was a great machine, waiting to be opened, examined, and understood. Eventually, his parents sent him to a small school. The classroom followed the usual methods of the time. Students sat in rows, memorized lessons, repeated answers, and obeyed the teacher. Thomas struggled almost immediately. He asked questions that interrupted the lesson. His attention moved wherever curiosity led it. He appeared unable to fit the shape the school demanded. To the teacher, this restless child was not a promising student. He was a problem that required correction. After only a short period, Thomas returned home deeply upset. He had heard himself described as confused and incapable of proper learning. Such words can settle heavily inside a child. Repeated often enough, they can become a private prison. But Nancy Edison refused to allow another person to decide the limits of her son. She confronted the school, removed him from the classroom, and chose to teach him herself. It was a bold decision, and no one could yet know how much depended upon it. With that decision, the direction of his life changed. The boy, who had been made to feel defective, entered an education shaped around curiosity instead of obedience. His mother gave him books, time, and permission to explore. She did not promise that he would become famous. She simply protected the part of him that wanted to know. Sometimes the difference between a child who disappears and a child who changes the world is not talent alone. Sometimes it is one person who refuses to let that talent be silenced. Learning at home looked nothing like the classrooms of the 1850s. There were no rows of desks, no ringing bells, and no strict schedule that divided the day into predictable lessons. Instead, every corner of the house became an opportunity to discover something new. The kitchen became a place where simple chemical reactions could be observed. The garden became a living laboratory. The nearby woods became a library without walls. Under his mother's patient guidance, Thomas no longer studied because someone demanded it. He studied because his curiosity refused to rest. Nancy Edison quickly realized that forcing her son to memorize facts would accomplish very little. His mind worked differently. He did not simply want answers. He wanted to understand why the answers existed in the first place. When he finished reading a page, another question immediately appeared. When one mystery was solved, 3 more emerged. Rather than discouraging this endless chain of questions, his mother quietly encouraged it. She knew that genuine learning rarely followed a straight path. It wandered, paused, doubled back, and often arrived somewhere completely unexpected. Books soon became his closest companions. He devoured everything he could find, moving from history to chemistry, from mechanics to philosophy, often reading material intended for adults rather than children. Many of the words were unfamiliar, yet that never discouraged him. Instead of closing the book, he searched for meanings, asked his mother, or continued reading until the surrounding sentences revealed enough clues. Knowledge was not something handed to him in carefully measured portions. It became an endless landscape, waiting to be explored one page at a time. Among all the subjects that captured his imagination, science held a special fascination. Invisible forces seemed almost magical. Why did certain substances react violently, while others remained unchanged? What hidden laws governed heat, electricity, light, and motion? To many children, these questions might have sounded abstract. To Thomas, they felt intensely personal. He wanted to witness the answers with his own eyes. Reading about experiments was never enough. He believed every important idea deserved to be tested by his own hands. His parents eventually allowed him to transform a small space in the basement into a makeshift laboratory. It was hardly the polished research center people might imagine today. Dusty shelves held old bottles collected from wherever he could find them. Simple jars contained powders, acids, and strange liquids whose names fascinated him almost as much as their properties. Scraps of wire, broken tools, bits of metal, and worn pieces of equipment filled every available corner. To most visitors, the room looked like clutter. To Thomas, it looked like possibility. Many afternoons disappeared without anyone noticing. While other children played games outside, he mixed chemicals, recorded observations, and repeated experiments that often ended in failure. Sometimes nothing happened at all. Sometimes unpleasant smells filled the basement. Occasionally, a small explosion frightened everyone in the house, except the young experimenter responsible for it. Instead of becoming embarrassed, he became excited. Failure meant that something unexpected had occurred, and unexpected results usually contained valuable information. Even at a young age, he was beginning to treat mistakes as teachers rather than enemies. This habit would remain with him for the rest of his life. While many people avoided failure because it damaged their confidence, Thomas approached failure with unusual patience. Every unsuccessful attempt narrowed the search for the correct answer. Each disappointment removed another impossible path. Although he could not yet express this philosophy in elegant language, he was already living it. Progress rarely arrived through sudden inspiration. More often, it emerged from the quiet accumulation of countless imperfect attempts. There was another challenge growing quietly beside his curiosity. During childhood, Thomas suffered repeated illnesses, including severe infections that affected his hearing. Exactly how much hearing he lost, and precisely when it happened, would later become the subject of different stories. Some blamed scarlet fever. Others pointed to an accident that occurred years later on a railway train. Whatever the exact cause, the result became increasingly clear. The sounds of the world slowly retreated from him. Many people would have considered partial deafness a cruel limitation. Conversations became more difficult. Crowded places became confusing. Ordinary social life demanded greater effort. Yet Thomas gradually discovered something unexpected. Silence could become a form of concentration without constant distractions. He found it easier to remain absorbed in his thoughts for hours at a time. While the world around him became quieter, the world inside his imagination seemed to grow louder. Ideas occupied the space where noise might otherwise have entered. His mother refused to let anyone describe him as disabled. She never encouraged self-pity. Instead, she quietly reminded him that every person carried different strengths and weaknesses. What mattered was learning how to use the strengths wisely rather than mourning the weaknesses endlessly. Those conversations planted an attitude that would later define his entire career. Obstacles were real, but they were also problems waiting to be solved. Every inconvenience invited another invention. As the years passed, the family's financial situation remained uncertain. His father's businesses produced only modest success, and extra income was always welcome. Thomas understood that education alone would not support the household. He wanted to contribute. Unlike many children his age, he did not complain about work. In fact, the idea of earning money appealed to him because money represented freedom. Every coin earned meant another book purchased, another chemical acquired, another experiment made possible. Work and learning became partners rather than competitors. The expanding railroad system offered opportunities to ambitious young people willing to work hard. Trains connected towns that had once felt impossibly distant. Passengers wanted newspapers, snacks, fruit, and small comforts during long journeys. While many adults overlooked these simple needs, Thomas recognized them as business opportunities. Still, only a boy, he convinced his parents to let him sell newspapers and refreshments aboard the trains, running between Port Huron and Detroit. It was an unusual responsibility for someone so young, but he welcomed it eagerly. Each morning began before sunrise. While many children still slept comfortably in their beds, Thomas prepared for another day aboard the railway. The station smelled of coal smoke, hot iron, damp wood, and steam. Engines released deep clouds that drifted across the platforms before disappearing into the cold morning air. Conductors shouted instructions. Passengers hurried toward departing cars. Merchants carried crates of produce and bundles of newspapers. The entire station seemed alive with movement, and the young boy absorbed every detail with endless fascination. Selling newspapers taught him far more than mathematics or bookkeeping. He learned how people made decisions. Certain headlines attracted immediate attention, while others were ignored. Travelers preferred different products, depending on the weather, the time of day, and the length of the journey. Instead of accepting these patterns without thought, he carefully observed them. Almost without realizing it, he was conducting business experiments, just as carefully as he conducted chemical ones. Every customer became another source of information. Every sale revealed another lesson. Before long, he expanded beyond simply selling newspapers. He negotiated with suppliers, adjusted prices, and found creative ways to increase demand. When major national events occurred, he understood that passengers would eagerly purchase newspapers carrying dramatic headlines. He even arranged for telegraph operators to share breaking news before the train arrived, allowing excitement to spread through waiting crowds. By the time his newspapers reached the station, eager customers were already searching for the latest edition. The boy was not merely selling information. He was learning how information itself created value. Yet even during these busy working days, his scientific curiosity refused to disappear. Every dollar saved moved him one step closer to purchasing more chemicals and equipment. While many boys dreamed of toys or fashionable clothes, Thomas dreamed of larger experiments. The railway had given him something more valuable than wages. It had given him independence. Without fully realizing it, he was preparing for a life in which business and invention would become inseparable, each strengthening the other in ways that would eventually reshape the modern world. The railway quickly became far more than a place to earn a few dollars. For Thomas, every journey felt like another lesson about the world beyond his hometown. The train carried farmers, businessmen, politicians, soldiers, immigrants, and families searching for better lives. Each passenger brought different stories, different worries, and different dreams. While most young boys saw only customers, Thomas quietly watched people as carefully as he watched his experiments. He noticed how they reacted to news, how they spent their money, and what captured their attention first. Without realizing it, he was studying human nature alongside science. His route between Port Huron and Detroit gave him something even more valuable than experience. It gave him access to one of the largest cities in the region. Whenever his work allowed, he wandered through bookstores, libraries, and supply shops. Instead of spending his earnings on entertainment, he filled his arms with books on chemistry, electricity, mechanics, and natural philosophy. Many evenings ended with him returning home, carrying far more knowledge than merchandise. Every new volume seemed to open another door, revealing countless mysteries that demanded investigation. Eventually, reading and experimenting no longer satisfied him on their own. He wanted to create something useful, something that connected ideas with ordinary people. Newspapers fascinated him because they carried yesterday's events into today's conversations. One afternoon, an unusual thought crossed his mind. Rather than simply selling newspapers written by someone else, why not publish one himself? It sounded almost impossible for a boy his age. Yet, impossible ideas had already become his favorite kind. With remarkable determination, he obtained a small printing press and placed it inside the baggage car of the railway. The space was cramped, noisy, and constantly shaking as the train rolled across uneven tracks. Ink bottles slid across wooden tables. Whenever the train rounded sharp curves, paper had to be protected from smoke, dust, and damp air. Nothing about the arrangement appeared practical. Nevertheless, to Thomas, it represented another laboratory. Only this time, the experiments involved words instead of chemicals. The newspaper he produced focused largely on railway news, local events, and information that interested regular passengers. Although its circulation remained small, the achievement itself was extraordinary. Somewhere inside a moving train, a teenage boy was researching stories, setting type by hand, printing pages, and selling his own publication to travelers before the journey ended. Every edition taught him something about communication. Information he discovered could travel almost as powerfully as machines. Ideas themselves possessed enormous value when they reached the right audience at the right moment. His working space soon became even more crowded. Alongside the printing equipment stood bottles filled with chemicals for ongoing experiments. Whenever business slowed, he returned to his scientific investigations. The baggage car transformed into a strange combination of laboratory, workshop, office, and printing room. To anyone else, it might have looked chaotic. To Thomas, it represented perfect efficiency. Every spare minute became an opportunity to test another theory. Idleness seemed almost impossible because his curiosity always found another question waiting to be answered. Then one ordinary day, everything changed. During one experiment, a container of phosphorus accidentally tipped over phosphorus. Within moments, flames spread across the wooden floor of the railway car. Smoke filled the compartment as the train continued, racing along the tracks. Railway employees rushed toward the fire, managing to extinguish it before greater damage occurred. Although the disaster remained relatively small, the conductor reacted with understandable anger. Valuable equipment had been endangered, passengers had been placed at risk, and the young experimenter had clearly pushed his freedom too far. According to one of the most widely repeated accounts, the conductor threw both the printing press and the laboratory equipment from the train before forcing Thomas to leave. Some versions of the story also describe the conductor striking him across the side of the head during the confrontation. Historians continue to debate exactly how much of this account is literally accurate. What remains beyond dispute is that the accident ended his remarkable laboratory aboard the railway and marked another difficult turning point in his young life. Whether the blow itself caused additional hearing loss or merely worsened an existing condition has never been fully settled. Thomas himself later told different versions of the story at different times. Perhaps memory had blended with legend over the years. Perhaps certain details no longer mattered to him. What remained undeniable was that his hearing continued to decline. Conversations became increasingly difficult. Voices often arrived as distant vibrations rather than clear words. Many people would have interpreted such a loss as the end of opportunity. Thomas refused to see it that way. Rather than dwelling on what had been taken from him, he focused on what remained possible. He often joked that his poor hearing protected him from unnecessary distractions. While crowded rooms exhausted others with endless conversation, he found it easier to withdraw into concentration. Silence became an unexpected companion. The quieter the outside world became, the more intensely his own thoughts seemed to develop. In later years, this extraordinary ability to focus for endless hours would astonish everyone who worked beside him. Still, practical problems could not be ignored forever. Without the income from his railway business, he needed another direction. Once again, fortune arrived, disguised as an ordinary moment. One morning, while waiting near the station, Thomas noticed a small child wandering dangerously close to an approaching freight train. There was hardly time to think. Instinct replaced hesitation. He rushed forward, grabbed the frightened boy, and pulled him clear only seconds before the heavy train thundered past. The child's father happened to be the station master. Overwhelmed with gratitude, he searched for a meaningful way to repay the young man who had saved his son's life. Money hardly seemed sufficient. Instead, he offered something that would shape the remainder of Thomas Edison's future. He offered to teach him telegraphy. At first glance, the telegraph appeared almost magical. Invisible electrical signals traveled across enormous distances through thin wires stretched between towns and cities. Messages that once required days of travel could now arrive within minutes. To many people, the telegraph represented modern convenience. To Thomas, it represented something far greater. It revealed that electricity could carry information, overcome distance, and transform the speed of human communication. He sensed immediately that he was standing before the doorway to an entirely new world. Learning telegraphy demanded patience, precision, and relentless practice. Operators had to recognize complex patterns of clicking sounds with remarkable accuracy. For someone whose hearing had already weakened, the challenge might have seemed overwhelming, yet Thomas approached the task with the same determination he had applied to chemistry and business. He practiced constantly, studying equipment long after others had gone home. Every mechanism fascinated him. He wanted not only to operate the machines, but also to understand exactly how they functioned beneath their polished surfaces. Before long, he became skilled enough to work as a telegraph operator himself. The position promised more than steady employment. It offered constant access to electrical equipment, mechanical systems, and some of the most advanced technology available during that era. Without realizing it, the curious boy, who had once filled a basement with homemade experiments, was stepping onto a path that would eventually lead him toward inventions, capable of changing the daily lives of millions of people across the world. Yet the greatest transformation had not happened inside the telegraph office. It had happened quietly within his own mind. Every disappointment had taught resilience. Every failed experiment had strengthened patience. Every setback had revealed another direction instead of another ending. And somewhere beyond the rhythmic clicking of telegraph keys, beyond the endless railway tracks stretching toward distant cities, another question was already waiting for him. It would become the question that defined the rest of his extraordinary life. What if electricity could do far more than carry messages? What if it could transform the way humanity itself lived after the sun went down? Working as a telegraph operator introduced Thomas Edison to a world that never truly slept. Railway stations remained active long after sunset. Telegraph offices glowed softly through the night as operators translated rapid streams of electrical pulses into messages that connected distant cities, wars, business agreements, family emergencies, political decisions, and breaking news. All traveled through thin strands of wire before arriving as rhythmic clicks inside quiet rooms. To many people, the telegraph was simply another useful invention. To Thomas, it was proof that invisible forces could reshape civilization itself. His first assignments required constant travel. One town would employ him for several weeks before another opportunity appeared somewhere farther away. He moved from station to station, carrying little more than a few belongings, several books, and an endless determination to learn. Each new office introduced different equipment, different supervisors, and different technical problems. While many operators viewed their duties as repetitive work, Thomas treated every malfunction as an invitation to investigate. He wanted to understand not only how each machine operated, but also why it occasionally failed. The long overnight shifts suited his personality surprisingly well. While others struggled to remain awake during the quiet hours before dawn, he found peace in the silence. Messages arrived unpredictably, leaving long stretches of uninterrupted time between transmissions. Instead of wasting those precious hours, he opened books, sketched mechanical ideas, and carefully examined the telegraph instruments surrounding him. Every switch, spring, battery, and wire seemed capable of teaching another lesson. The office itself became an extension of the laboratory he had lost on the railway years before. His fellow operators quickly noticed that he behaved differently from almost everyone else. When a machine malfunctioned, most employees repaired only the broken part before returning to work. Thomas could not stop there. Once the equipment functioned again, he continued taking it apart, studying each component until he understood its complete design. He often rebuilt mechanisms simply to discover whether they could be improved. This habit occasionally irritated supervisors who preferred practical efficiency over endless curiosity. But it revealed something essential about his character. He was never satisfied with merely using technology. He wanted to reinvent it. His partial deafness, once considered an unfortunate disadvantage, continued to shape his working life in unexpected ways. Noisy offices that distracted others hardly disturbed him. He became famous for concentrating so completely that people sometimes needed to touch his shoulder before he noticed their presence. While conversations drifted around him unnoticed, his attention remained fixed upon diagrams, gears, and electrical circuits. Many years later, colleagues would describe his remarkable ability to disappear into his work for hours, without the slightest awareness of the world beyond his desk. Constant travel also exposed him to the extraordinary speed at which America was changing. Railroads reached farther west every year. Factories multiplied along expanding cities. Industries demanded faster communication, greater efficiency, and more reliable machinery. Wherever Thomas went, he encountered businessmen searching for ways to save time and reduce costs. Gradually, an important realization formed in his mind. Invention was not simply about creating something clever. A successful invention solved real problems that ordinary people faced every single day. This understanding had grown from one painful memory he never entirely forgot. Years earlier, he had proudly presented an automatic voting recorder, believing politicians would welcome any device that increased efficiency. Instead, lawmakers rejected it because speed did not serve their interests. Debates, delays, and negotiations were often more valuable to them than immediate results. That disappointment remained one of the greatest lessons of his early career. From that moment forward, he promised himself that he would never devote years of effort to building something that nobody genuinely wanted to use. As he traveled from city to city, he quietly observed which problems appeared again and again. Telegraph operators struggled with slow equipment. Railway companies needed more dependable communication. Businesses wanted systems capable of handling increasing amounts of information. Rather than chasing grand scientific theories, Thomas began focusing on practical improvements. He believed even a small innovation could become enormously valuable if it saved thousands of workers a few minutes every day. Progress, he concluded, often arrived through countless useful improvements rather than a single dramatic breakthrough. Despite working almost constantly, he continued reading with astonishing discipline. Books filled every rented room in which he lived. Scientific journals lay scattered across tables beside unfinished sketches. Whenever he earned extra money, much of it disappeared into bookstores instead of restaurants or entertainment. Friends occasionally joked that he spent more time with authors than with living people. The observation was not entirely unfair. Books became silent mentors whose ideas accompanied him wherever the railway carried him next. His appearance reflected little concern for fashion or social expectations. His clothes often bore stains from oil, ink, or chemicals. His hair remained untidy. He frequently forgot meals because an interesting idea demanded immediate attention. Sleep itself became negotiable. If an experiment or mechanical problem captured his imagination, he willingly remained awake until sunrise. Many acquaintances mistook these habits for carelessness. In truth, his attention simply flowed toward questions that fascinated him, leaving ordinary routines somewhere far behind. Not every employer appreciated such behavior. More than once, his experiments interfered with official duties. Supervisors expected reliable operators who followed established procedures. Thomas constantly searched for better procedures instead. He automated repetitive tasks whenever possible, sometimes modifying equipment without asking permission first. While these changes occasionally improved efficiency, they also created tension with managers who valued predictability over innovation. His employment became a series of new beginnings, followed by unexpected departures. Yet every position left him with additional knowledge and greater confidence. During these wandering years, another important habit slowly emerged. Whenever he encountered a technical difficulty that others accepted as unavoidable, he refused to accept it immediately. Instead, he asked himself a simple question: what if there were another way? This question appeared so often that it gradually became the invisible foundation beneath every invention he would later create. Many people accepted limitations because they had grown accustomed to them. Thomas preferred to examine the limitation itself, convinced that somewhere beneath it another possibility remained hidden. One evening, after finishing another exhausting shift, he remained alone inside the telegraph office, long after everyone else had gone home. The clicking instruments had fallen silent. Only the faint smell of warm metal and machine oil lingered in the room. He looked across the tangled wires, stretching toward distant cities, and wondered how many other invisible possibilities still waited to be discovered. If electricity could carry messages across hundreds of kilometers, perhaps it could perform countless other tasks that no one had yet imagined. Perhaps the world had barely begun to understand the true language of electrical power. That quiet thought refused to leave him. It followed him through every assignment, every journey, and every sleepless night. Gradually, the young telegraph operator stopped thinking of himself as an employee earning wages. Somewhere deep inside, another identity had begun to take shape. He no longer wished merely to repair machines designed by others. He wanted to build machines that had never existed before. He wanted to create devices capable of changing everyday life, so completely that future generations would struggle to imagine the world that had existed before them. He could not yet know where that ambition would lead. He did not know that one day investors, journalists, scientists, and presidents would seek his attention. He did not know that entire laboratories would eventually work under his direction, or that his name would become almost synonymous with invention itself. At that moment, he remained simply a restless young man, sitting alone beside silent telegraph instruments, asking questions that no one else seemed interested in asking. Sometimes history changes, not through a dramatic announcement, but through a single quiet decision made in an empty room, when one curious mind chooses to believe that the impossible has simply not been attempted yet. After years of drifting from one telegraph office to another, Thomas Edison had accumulated something far more valuable than a steady salary. He had gathered experience that could never be purchased in a classroom. Every broken relay, every failed battery, every delayed message had quietly expanded his understanding of electricity. While other operators became experts at following instructions, he became obsessed with improving the systems themselves. Somewhere along the way, he stopped thinking like an employee and began thinking like an inventor. The difference between those two ways of seeing the world was enormous. An employee asks how a machine should be operated. An inventor asks why it was built that way in the first place. An employee accepts limitations because they are part of the job. An inventor studies those same limitations until they become opportunities. This habit of questioning ordinary assumptions would soon separate Thomas from nearly everyone working around him. He could no longer ignore the countless imperfections hidden inside the machines that powered modern communication. During one assignment, he spent hours studying a complicated telegraph system after finishing his official duties. Instead of returning to his boarding house for rest, he remained alone inside the office, carefully tracing each wire and examining every moving component. The building had grown silent, except for the occasional ticking of clocks mounted upon the walls. Outside, the streets had emptied beneath the darkness. Inside, one young operator continued searching for answers that no supervisor had asked him to find. Those long nights taught him something remarkable. Many machines were not inefficient, because the technology itself had reached its limits. They were inefficient, because no one had questioned the original design for years. Engineers often accepted familiar methods simply because they had always existed. Thomas found this strangely frustrating. If a machine could perform one task, perhaps it could perform two. If it completed one message at a time, perhaps it could handle several. Progress, he believed, often began with the courage to ask what everyone else considered an unnecessary question. Slowly, sketches began filling the pages of his notebooks. Some ideas were practical improvements, others bordered on fantasy. He imagined automatic systems capable of reducing human effort. He imagined machines that could perform repetitive work with greater speed and accuracy. Many of these concepts never advanced beyond rough drawings. Yet every unsuccessful idea strengthened his ability to recognize better ones. He was unknowingly training the most important tool any inventor possesses: the ability to imagine possibilities before evidence exists to support them. His confidence continued growing until he finally decided that merely repairing existing technology would never satisfy him. He wanted to create inventions of his own. This decision carried enormous risk. Steady employment, however modest, offered security. Invention offered uncertainty. Countless dreamers had already spent years chasing impossible ideas, only to lose everything they owned. Friends quietly warned him against abandoning reliable work for unpredictable ambitions. Practical people advised him to remain a skilled telegraph operator. A few believed that an ordinary young man without wealth or formal scientific training could compete with established inventors. Thomas listened politely, but his mind had already moved beyond such advice. Every journey across the expanding nation convinced him that America was entering an age unlike anything history had witnessed before. Factories demanded better equipment. Railroads required safer communication. Businesses searched constantly for faster methods. Everywhere he looked, society presented new problems waiting for practical solutions. He sensed that the coming decades would belong not only to businessmen or politicians, but also to those capable of transforming ideas into useful inventions. With that conviction growing stronger, he traveled east, eventually arriving in Boston, one of the country's leading centers of science, manufacturing, and intellectual life. Compared with the towns where he had previously worked, the city felt alive with ambition. Workshops echoed with the sounds of metal tools striking steel. Bookstores overflowed with the latest scientific publications. Lectures attracted engineers, professors, and curious citizens eager to hear about new discoveries. For someone like Thomas, Boston seemed less like a city than an enormous classroom. Yet appearances could be deceiving. Beneath the excitement lay constant financial pressure. His savings disappeared quickly. Boarding houses demanded payment. Meals remained simple because every unnecessary expense meant less money available for books and experimental materials. There were evenings when he owned little more than the clothes he wore, and the notebooks filled with mechanical ideas. A hunger visited him often enough that it gradually became familiar. Instead of discouraging him, these hardships seemed only to sharpen his determination. Friends occasionally found him asleep beside workbenches rather than inside comfortable beds. Exhaustion became an accepted companion. When inspiration arrived, he refused to interrupt it for ordinary comforts. Many future colleagues would later recall that Thomas possessed an almost unnatural capacity for sustained effort. While others counted the hours until the working day ended, he barely noticed the passing of time. Curiosity seemed to replace fatigue. Solving one technical problem simply revealed another that demanded immediate attention. It was during this period that he completed one of his earliest significant inventions, an automatic vote recording machine. Technically, the device performed exactly as intended. It allowed legislators to register votes almost instantly, eliminating the slow manual process then commonly used. From an engineering perspective, the invention represented genuine progress. Convinced he had created something valuable, Thomas proudly demonstrated the machine to government officials, expecting enthusiasm and immediate interest. The reaction surprised him. Instead of celebrating greater efficiency, the politicians politely rejected the invention. They explained that rapid voting did not actually benefit legislative debate. Delays often provided valuable time for negotiation, persuasion, and political strategy. Speed, which seemed unquestionably desirable to an engineer, threatened established political practices. The machine worked perfectly. The market simply did not want it. For many young inventors, such rejection might have destroyed confidence. Months of effort had produced no financial reward and no public recognition. Thomas certainly felt disappointed, but disappointment quickly transformed into insight as he reflected upon the experience. He recognized that technical brilliance alone guaranteed nothing. Invention could never exist in isolation from human needs. People adopted technology not because it was clever, but because it solved problems they genuinely wished to solve. That realization became one of the defining principles of his entire career. Years later, he would summarize the lesson in simple language. He resolved never again to invent something that people did not actually want. Every future project would begin not with fascinating technology, but with practical demand. Before asking whether an idea could be built, he would first ask whether it deserved to be built. This philosophy distinguished him from many brilliant inventors, whose creations impressed scientists while remaining irrelevant to ordinary life. Although the voting machine failed commercially, it accomplished something far more important. It reshaped the direction of his thinking. Failure had once again become a teacher instead of an enemy. Every unsuccessful invention removed another illusion and replaced it with deeper understanding. Progress, he discovered, required listening not only to science but also to society. The greatest inventions emerged where technical possibility and human necessity finally met. Standing outside the government building after that disappointing demonstration, Thomas carried his invention beneath one arm and his notebooks beneath the other. No cheering crowd waited to congratulate him. No, investors rushed forward with generous offers. The streets continued exactly as they had before, indifferent to one young inventor's frustration. Yet, as he walked through the busy city, another thought quietly formed inside his mind. Perhaps this failure was not the closing chapter he had feared. Perhaps it was simply pointing him toward a much larger opportunity that neither he nor anyone else could yet imagine. Somewhere ahead waited a problem so enormous, so universal, that solving it would change not merely one industry, but the everyday lives of millions of people around the world. The lesson stayed with Thomas Edison long after he left the government office, carrying the invention that nobody wanted to buy. Many people would have remembered only the rejection. He remembered the reason behind it. The machine had performed exactly as designed, yet it had failed because it solved the wrong problem. That distinction became impossible for him to ignore. From that day forward, every idea would begin with a simple question: what difficulty do ordinary people face every single day? And how can it be made easier? Rather than becoming discouraged, he returned to work with even greater determination. Failure had stripped away unnecessary illusions and replaced them with clarity. He no longer dreamed of inventing complicated machines merely to impress engineers or scientists. He wanted to create tools that factories would purchase, businesses would depend upon, and families would eventually welcome into their homes. Invention, he realized, was not an isolated act of genius. It was a conversation between imagination and everyday life. During the years that followed, he continued refining telegraph equipment. Communication networks expanded rapidly across the United States, carrying an ever-increasing number of messages between cities. Demand grew faster than existing technology could comfortably handle. Operators worked tirelessly to keep pace, yet delays remained common. Businesses lost valuable time whenever information moved too slowly. To Thomas, these frustrations represented opportunities waiting quietly beneath the surface of ordinary routines. He began experimenting with systems capable of transmitting more than one message along the same wire. The concept challenged accepted assumptions. Most engineers believed each electrical line could carry only a limited amount of information at any given moment. Thomas questioned that belief. If music could contain many notes without becoming meaningless, perhaps electrical signals could also be organized more intelligently. He spent countless evenings testing circuits, adjusting batteries, and redesigning mechanical components until small improvements gradually began to appear. His working habits became legendary among the people who knew him. Once absorbed by a technical problem, he seemed almost unaware of hunger, fatigue, or the passing of time. Friends occasionally arrived, expecting to find him asleep, only to discover him standing over a cluttered workbench exactly where they had left him the previous evening. Empty coffee cups, scattered diagrams, tangled wires, and notebooks covered every available surface. The room itself appeared chaotic. But inside that apparent disorder, every object occupied a place known perfectly to its owner. There were moments when experiments failed one after another for days without producing meaningful progress. Batteries overheated. Electrical contacts refused to cooperate. Delicate components broke at the worst possible moment. Investors grew impatient whenever development required more time than expected. Yet, These setbacks rarely changed his mood for long. He possessed an unusual ability to separate personal disappointment from scientific investigation. If an experiment failed, it simply revealed another method that would not succeed. The answer still existed somewhere. He merely had not reached it yet. This attitude gradually attracted attention. Experienced businessmen noticed that the young inventor approached problems differently from most engineers. He did not become emotionally attached to a single design. If evidence suggested another solution might work better, he willingly abandoned weeks of effort and started again. Pride never mattered as much as progress. Such flexibility proved surprisingly rare. Many talented inventors defended unsuccessful ideas simply because they had invested too much time in them. Thomas preferred to protect the future rather than the past. Before long, several improvements to telegraph technology began generating real financial rewards. Unlike the unsuccessful voting recorder, these inventions solved immediate commercial problems. Companies recognized their value because they increased efficiency and reduced operating costs. For the first time, invention became more than an intellectual pursuit. It became a practical profession, capable of supporting further research. Each successful improvement provided money for additional equipment, larger workshops, and increasingly ambitious experiments. One transaction changed his life more dramatically than he could have imagined. After developing an improved stock ticker system that transmitted financial information more reliably, he negotiated the sale of his invention to a major company. As discussions progressed, he quietly wondered what amount he should request. Before he could decide, the company offered him a sum far beyond anything he had expected. The payment amounted to $40,000, an extraordinary fortune for a young inventor who had once struggled to afford books and simple meals. For a moment, he reportedly wondered whether he had misunderstood the figure. It seemed impossible that ideas sketched inside worn notebooks could possess such value. Yet, the money was real, and with it came something far more important than comfort. It brought independence. For the first time in his life, Thomas possessed enough resources to pursue invention without constantly worrying about survival. Poverty had forced him to think carefully. Financial freedom, now, allowed him to think boldly. Instead of spending his newfound wealth on luxury, he invested almost everything back into his work. Expensive clothes held little interest. Elegant houses meant very little. His greatest dream was not comfort, but creation. He wanted a place where inventors, machinists, chemists, and mechanics could work together under one roof, testing ideas continuously rather than waiting for occasional inspiration. At the time, such a vision seemed almost revolutionary. Inventors usually worked alone. Thomas imagined something entirely different. He purchased land in a quiet rural area known as Menlo Park, New Jersey. To passing travelers, the location appeared unremarkable. Open fields stretched toward the horizon. Scattered buildings stood beneath broad skies. Few people could have guessed that this peaceful landscape would soon become one of the most famous centers of innovation in the world. Where others saw empty land, Thomas saw possibility. He intended to build not merely another workshop, but a place where invention itself could become an organized process. Construction moved quickly. Workshops rose beside laboratories. Storage rooms filled with chemicals, tools, glass, metal, wood, batteries, and precision instruments. Skilled workers arrived from different backgrounds, each bringing unique talents. Machinists transformed rough sketches into working prototypes. Chemists analyzed materials. Technicians assembled delicate mechanisms. Every building seemed to pulse with constant activity. Unlike traditional workshops that focused upon a single project, Menlo Park encouraged many experiments to unfold at the same time. The atmosphere inside the laboratory differed from almost any workplace of its era. Clocks mattered surprisingly little. If inspiration appeared after midnight, work continued until dawn. If an important breakthrough seemed close, Meals were forgotten and sleep postponed. Conversations shifted effortlessly between engineering, chemistry, mathematics, and practical manufacturing. Failure carried no embarrassment because everyone understood it as part of the creative process. Ideas moved from one workbench to another, changing shape as different minds contributed fresh perspectives. Visitors often describe the laboratory as a strange mixture of discipline and imagination. Beneath the apparent disorder lay extraordinary purpose. Every experiment, whether successful or unsuccessful, added another piece to a growing body of knowledge. Thomas encouraged relentless testing because he believed certainty emerged only through evidence. Inspiration might suggest a direction, but careful experimentation determined whether that direction deserved to survive. Imagination opened the door. Persistence carried people through it. As evening settled over Menlo Park for one of the first times, lamps illuminated windows, behind which dozens of unfinished ideas waited patiently upon crowded benches. Bottles reflected the warm light. Gears rested beside coils of copper wire. Unfinished sketches covered wooden tables. Outside, the surrounding countryside remained peaceful and dark. Inside, however, something entirely new had begun. Without fully realizing it, Thomas Edison had created the world's first true invention factory, a place where remarkable ideas would no longer depend upon isolated moments of genius, but would emerge through relentless collaboration, disciplined experimentation, and an almost stubborn refusal to believe that any problem was beyond the reach of human curiosity. Menlo Park quickly became unlike any place the United States had ever seen. Visitors who expected a quiet workshop found instead a community driven almost entirely by curiosity. The buildings remained illuminated long after neighboring homes had gone dark. Windows glowed through the night, while shadows moved behind them as engineers, machinists, chemists, and draftsmen hurried from one experiment to the next. The laboratory rarely seemed to sleep. Ideas arrived at unpredictable hours, and Thomas believed inspiration should never be forced to wait until morning, simply because a clock declared the working day had ended. The atmosphere inside reflected the personality of the man who had created it. Order existed, but it was not the polished order of government offices or university classrooms. Workbenches overflowed with tools, coils of copper wire, pieces of polished wood, glass tubes, batteries, notebooks, and unfinished machines, waiting for another attempt. Every object suggested that someone had been thinking intensely only moments earlier. Strangers often mistook the laboratory for confusion. Those who worked there understood that every corner contained another question, waiting patiently for its answer. Thomas rarely behaved like a distant employer, issuing instructions from behind a desk. Instead, he moved constantly between different rooms, stopping to examine an experiment before disappearing toward another project already demanding his attention. One moment, he discussed chemistry with a laboratory assistant. The next, he studied mechanical drawings with a machinist. A few minutes later, he returned, carrying another idea that completely changed the direction of the work. His energy seemed impossible to exhaust. Even people many years younger struggled to match the pace he considered ordinary. Those who joined his team soon discovered that working beside him required unusual endurance. Ordinary schedules meant very little. When a promising experiment approached an important breakthrough, everyone remained until the work reached a natural stopping point. Whether that occurred before midnight or after sunrise, meals became brief interruptions rather than fixed appointments. Sleep was postponed without complaint whenever progress appeared close. Although the demands were exhausting, many assistants later admitted they had never experienced such excitement anywhere else. Every day carried the possibility of witnessing something that had never before existed. Thomas encouraged open discussion among everyone in the laboratory regardless of position. An experienced machinist could challenge an engineer. A young assistant could suggest an entirely different approach if evidence supported the idea. The respect came not from titles, but from results. This culture of collaboration gradually distinguished Menlo Park from traditional workshops, where individual inventors guarded their ideas in complete secrecy. Thomas believed that good ideas became stronger when exposed to many different minds. Competition existed, but it remained directed towards solving problems rather than protecting personal pride. His notebooks multiplied at an astonishing rate. Every observation, however small, deserved to be recorded. Measurements, sketches, failures, unexpected reactions, and passing thoughts filled thousands of handwritten pages. While some inventors trusted memory, Thomas trusted careful documentation. He understood that discoveries often emerged only after comparing hundreds of previous attempts. What appeared meaningless today might become the missing piece several months later. Nothing was considered too insignificant to preserve. Information itself became one of the laboratory's greatest resources. The growing reputation of Menlo Park attracted visitors from across the country. Journalists arrived hoping to witness extraordinary demonstrations. Businessmen searched for promising investments. Scientists came to exchange ideas or simply satisfy their curiosity. Many left astonished by the intensity of the work taking place inside those modest buildings. They expected to find a solitary genius producing miracles through mysterious inspiration. Instead, they discovered disciplined experimentation carried out with remarkable persistence. Invention, they realized, resembled hard labor, far more than sudden flashes of brilliance. Among the many projects occupying the laboratory, one began attracting increasing attention. Thomas had become fascinated by an idea that many respected scientists considered impossible. People had learned to send electrical signals across great distances through telegraph wires. But could sound itself somehow be captured, preserved, and played back later? The thought seemed almost absurd. Voices disappeared. The instant they were spoken, music vanished. As soon as the final note faded into silence, that had always been the natural order of human experience. Still, the question refused to leave him. If electrical signals could carry information across continents, perhaps vibrations from the human voice could also leave physical traces somewhere. Perhaps sound did not truly disappear. Perhaps it merely lacked a suitable container. For weeks, the laboratory echoed with discussions about vibrating membranes, rotating cylinders, fine needles, and delicate grooves cut into different materials. Every conversation generated another experiment. Every experiment produced another unexpected lesson. Progress arrived slowly, but the direction remained unmistakable. One evening, surrounded by scattered equipment and unfinished sketches, Thomas assembled a simple device unlike anything anyone had previously seen. Its appearance was surprisingly ordinary. There was no elegant decoration or polished craftsmanship. It looked more like a collection of practical parts connected by stubborn optimism. A cylinder wrapped in thin material rotated, while a small diaphragm responded to sound waves through an attached needle. The theory appeared simple enough. Whether it would actually work remained entirely uncertain. The assistants gathered nearby with cautious curiosity. Many had watched countless experiments fail before. No one wished to celebrate too early. Thomas leaned toward the machine and spoke slowly into it. After adjusting the mechanism, he carefully reversed its motion. For a brief moment, the room remained completely silent. Then, from the strange collection of metal and moving parts, came a faint but unmistakable human voice. Everyone froze. The sound was weak and mechanical, yet there could be no doubt about what they had just heard. A machine had repeated words that had been spoken only moments earlier. Something that had existed only in memory throughout all of human history had suddenly become permanent. The room erupted with astonishment. Some laughed in disbelief. Others stood speechless. Several immediately demanded another demonstration because their minds refused to accept what their ears had just witnessed. News of the invention spread with extraordinary speed. Newspapers described the talking machine as though it belonged more naturally in a fantasy novel than in an engineering workshop. Crowds traveled to Menlo Park, hoping to hear the mysterious device for themselves. Many suspected trickery until they witnessed the demonstration with their own eyes. Children stared in amazement. Experienced scientists struggled to explain what they had just observed. Ordinary people left wondering whether they had glimpsed the future. Before long, journalists searching for dramatic language began calling Thomas Edison the Wizard of Menlo Park. The nickname captured the public imagination because his inventions often appeared almost magical to those unfamiliar with the science behind them. Yet anyone working beside him understood a quieter truth. There had been no magic inside the laboratory. There had been only endless observation, relentless testing, careful measurement, repeated failure, and an unwavering belief that every difficult problem possessed an answer, waiting patiently beneath countless unsuccessful attempts. The talking machine transformed Thomas from a respected inventor into an international celebrity almost overnight. Invitations arrived from every direction. Investors sought meetings. Newspapers competed for interviews. Governments took notice. Yet amid all the excitement, his attention drifted toward another challenge already occupying his imagination. Preserving sound was extraordinary, but another mystery seemed even greater. Every evening, as darkness settled across towns and cities, millions of families still depended upon candles, oil, lamps, and open flames. Somewhere inside that familiar darkness, Thomas believed, waited the most important invention of his entire life. Among all the inventions occupying the minds of engineers during the late 19th century, none seemed more ambitious than replacing the familiar flame that had illuminated humanity for thousands of years. Candles, oil, lamps, and gas lighting had become ordinary companions of everyday life. They flickered inside family homes, factories, schools, churches, and city streets. People accepted their weaknesses because they knew no better alternative. Flames produced smoke, dangerous heat, unpleasant odors, and constant risk of fire. Yet they also represented comfort. Asking society to abandon them sounded almost impossible. Many inventors had already attempted to create practical electric lighting. Some succeeded in producing brief flashes of light inside laboratories. But those demonstrations rarely lasted long enough to become useful. The real challenge was never simply making electricity glow. The challenge was creating a lamp that ordinary families could afford, trust, and use safely every evening. A scientific curiosity could impress visitors for a few minutes. Changing the daily lives of millions required something entirely different. Thomas understood this distinction better than most. The lesson learned from his failed voting recorder had remained with him for years. He no longer chased inventions because they appeared clever. He pursued ideas capable of solving problems shared by countless people. Darkness was one such problem. Every sunset forced homes and businesses to depend upon fragile flames. If electricity could provide reliable light, it would not merely improve one industry, it would quietly transform nearly every aspect of modern civilization. Many respected scientists doubted the goal could be achieved. Newspapers questioned whether electric lighting would ever become practical. Rival inventors pursued their own approaches, each convinced that success remained just beyond the next experiment. The competition grew increasingly intense. Every laboratory searched for better materials, stronger electrical systems, and more dependable designs. Failure arrived so frequently that many observers concluded the problem itself might be impossible. Inside Menlo Park, however, discouragement found little room to grow. Thomas gathered his assistants and explained that the solution would not appear through luck alone. If one material failed, another would be tested. If another failed, they would simply continue searching. Somewhere in nature existed a substance capable of glowing brightly without burning too quickly. The challenge was discovering it. Inspiration would begin the journey, but persistence would finish it. That philosophy soon became the heartbeat of the laboratory. Days blended into nights until no one could easily remember where one ended and the other began. Workbenches filled with samples gathered from every imaginable source. Different metals were heated, cooled, stretched, and examined. Plant fibers from distant countries arrived in carefully labeled packages. Cotton, linen, wood, cardboard, bamboo, grasses, and countless unfamiliar materials passed through the hands of researchers searching for the perfect filament. Every experiment answered one question while creating several new ones. The laboratory gradually resembled the storeroom of an explorer rather than the workshop of an inventor. Shelves overflowed with strange objects collected from around the world. Visitors often smiled at the unusual assortment, wondering how pieces of ordinary plants could possibly help create the future of electric lighting. Thomas welcomed their curiosity. Experience had taught him that extraordinary discoveries often emerged from materials most people considered completely ordinary. Nature possessed remarkable possibilities for those willing to examine it patiently enough. Failure became a daily companion. One filament glowed brilliantly before collapsing after only a few seconds. Another survived longer, but consumed too much electricity. A different material remained strong, yet refused to produce enough light. Sometimes, an entire week ended without meaningful progress. Then, another week passed, with equally disappointing results. Still, no one stopped. Thomas encouraged every unsuccessful attempt to be recorded with meticulous detail. Each broken filament represented knowledge gained rather than effort wasted. While outsiders counted failures, the laboratory counted eliminated possibilities. The difference between those two perspectives shaped everything. To many observers, thousands of unsuccessful experiments suggested defeat. To the team inside Menlo Park, they simply narrowed the path toward the answer that still remained hidden. Reporters occasionally visited, hoping for dramatic announcements. Instead, they found exhausted researchers surrounded by broken glass, scorched wires, blackened filaments, and endless pages of measurements. Some newspapers began criticizing the project, suggesting that enormous amounts of money had been wasted chasing an unrealistic dream. Competitors quietly celebrated every rumor, describing another failed experiment. They assumed that sooner or later, even Thomas Edison would abandon such an impossible ambition. He never did. Instead, he became even more convinced that persistence itself could become a competitive advantage. Brilliant ideas mattered, but the willingness to continue after repeated disappointment mattered even more. Many talented inventors stopped searching after 100 unsuccessful attempts. Thomas believed the answer might appear on the next trial after 1,000 disappointments. Nobody could know in advance which experiment would finally succeed. The only guarantee of failure was deciding to stop before reaching it. His assistants later remembered how completely absorbed he became during those months. Meals often remained untouched until someone reminded him they had grown cold. Conversations drifted naturally toward electrical resistance, vacuum pumps, carbonization, and manufacturing methods. When one researcher grew discouraged, another suggested a fresh direction. Every member of the team understood that they were chasing something larger than a single invention. They were attempting to reshape the relationship between humanity and the night itself. Eventually, attention turned toward carefully carbonized plant fibers. After numerous trials, one particular approach began producing unexpectedly encouraging results. The filament glowed with greater stability than many previous materials. Everyone resisted, celebrating too soon. Countless earlier experiments had shown promise before ending in disappointment. This time they simply watched, saying very little while the glowing filament continued shining inside the carefully evacuated glass bulb. Minutes passed. Then another hour. The light remained. Fatigue slowly gave way to cautious excitement. Someone checked the electrical system again. Convinced an error must have occurred. There was no mistake. The bulb continued glowing. The laboratory, so accustomed to disappointment, suddenly found itself standing before undeniable success. Yet Thomas understood that the glowing bulb alone did not complete the problem. Creating a practical lamp meant almost nothing if homes lacked reliable electricity to power it. People would need generators, distribution lines, switches, meters, and safe wiring connecting entire neighborhoods. Once again, he refused to solve only part of the challenge. If electric lighting truly belonged to the future required an entire system rather than a single remarkable object. That realization opened an even greater chapter. The invention resting quietly upon the laboratory bench was no longer simply a light bulb. It had become the first visible piece of a much larger vision. One that imagined cities where darkness no longer dictated the rhythm of human life. Somewhere beyond the walls of Menlo, park-weighted streets, still illuminated by flickering gas lamps, and homes where families carefully protected tiny flames from the evening wind. Thomas looked beyond those familiar scenes and imagined something entirely different. He imagined a world where, with the simple movement of a hand, gentle light would appear instantly, filling ordinary rooms with a brightness so dependable that future generations might one day forget there had ever been another way. The successful lamp represented only the beginning of a much larger revolution. Thomas Edison understood something that many observers overlooked. An electric bulb by itself possessed little value if it remained trapped inside a laboratory demonstration. People could not simply purchase a lamp and expect light to appear. Electricity had to be generated, controlled, distributed, measured, and delivered safely into homes and businesses. Solving only one part of that enormous challenge would never be enough. The entire system had to function together as naturally as the human body. This way of thinking distinguished Thomas from many brilliant inventors of his generation. While others concentrated upon individual devices, he imagined complete networks connecting countless inventions into one practical whole. He often reminded his assistants that ordinary families cared very little about scientific theory. They cared whether a lamp turned on every evening without danger or inconvenience. Success would depend not upon laboratory applause, but upon everyday reliability. Every wire, switch, generator, and fuse had to perform its task, almost invisibly. Inside Menlo Park, the pace of work became even more intense than before. Engineers designed generators capable of producing stable electrical current. Machinists refined mechanical parts that operated with greater precision. Chemists continued improving insulating materials, while electricians experimented with safer methods of wiring buildings. One successful invention immediately created 10 additional problems demanding solutions. Instead of celebrating, the laboratory simply expanded its efforts. Every breakthrough became another starting point, rather than a finishing line. The project soon extended far beyond the laboratory walls. Streets, factories, and entire neighborhoods became subjects of careful planning. Where should electrical stations be located? How far could current travel before weakening? How could underground cables be protected from moisture? What type of meters would accurately measure electricity used by each customer? Questions multiplied faster than answers. Many evenings ended with tables completely covered by maps, calculations, engineering drawings, and handwritten notes filled with possible solutions. The financial risks also grew steadily larger. Constructing an entire electrical system required enormous investment. Factories had to manufacture generators, cables, sockets, switches, and light bulbs on an unprecedented scale. Investors naturally questioned whether ordinary people would embrace such unfamiliar technology. Gas companies, whose businesses depended upon traditional lighting, viewed the expanding electrical industry with growing concern. Newspapers published heated debates between supporters and critics, each convinced that history favored their side. Thomas remained remarkably calm throughout the controversy. He understood that skepticism often accompanied every important innovation. People feared what they had never experienced before. Many citizens believed electricity itself to be mysterious and dangerous. Stories circulated, describing invisible forces capable of causing injury or death. Convincing families to welcome electrical wiring into their homes required more than scientific evidence. It required trust. Trust, he believed, could only be earned through consistent performance. To demonstrate that confidence, public exhibitions became increasingly important. Visitors gathered inside specially illuminated buildings where electric lamps replaced familiar gas flames. The experience astonished many who attended. Instead of smoky air, rooms felt cleaner. Instead of flickering shadows dancing across walls, light remained steady and calm. There were no exposed flames, threatening curtains, or wooden furniture. People found themselves reading more comfortably, working later into the evening, and seeing colors with surprising clarity. What had seemed like an impossible dream suddenly became something they could experience with their own eyes. One of the most remarkable demonstrations occurred on New Year's Eve in 1879. Crowds traveled to Menlo Park from surrounding towns, curious to witness the inventor's latest achievement. As darkness settled across the winter landscape, hundreds of electric lamps illuminated the laboratory grounds. Pathways glowed with soft white light, unlike anything most visitors had ever seen. Families wandered beneath the illuminated trees in complete amazement. Children pointed excitedly toward the brilliant lamps, while adults struggled to comprehend that no flames burned inside them. Newspapers carried descriptions of the event throughout the country. Readers who had never visited Menlo Park imagined streets illuminated without lanterns, factories operating more safely after sunset, and homes filled with clean, dependable light. Public imagination expanded almost overnight. Electricity no longer belonged exclusively to scientists. It had entered ordinary conversation. People who once doubted its practicality now began wondering when their own neighborhoods might receive electrical service. Still, transforming curiosity into permanent infrastructure demanded relentless effort. In 1882, Thomas oversaw one of the most ambitious projects of his career, the construction of the Pearl Street Power Station in Lower Manhattan. Unlike earlier demonstrations, this facility aimed to provide continuous electrical service to paying customers across an entire district. Generators filled the station with constant mechanical rhythm, while underground cables carried electricity beneath busy city streets toward offices, businesses, and homes. When the system finally began operating, it marked one of the defining moments of the modern age. Dozens of buildings received reliable electric power from a centralized station. Lights appeared almost instantly at the movement of a switch. Office workers remained productive after sunset. Merchants displayed goods more attractively behind brightly illuminated windows. The city itself seemed to acquire a different rhythm. Night no longer demanded complete retreat from daily activity. The boundaries separating daylight from darkness had quietly begun to change. The success attracted worldwide attention. Engineers from Europe, Asia, and South America traveled to study the new electrical system. Governments dispatched representatives eager to understand the technology transforming American cities. Investors recognized that an entirely new industry had begun emerging before their eyes. Factories, manufacturing, electrical equipment expanded rapidly. Skilled workers found new careers installing wiring, constructing power stations, and maintaining electrical networks. Thousands of opportunities grew from an idea that only a few years earlier many experts had dismissed as unrealistic. Yet amid growing fame, Thomas himself changed surprisingly little. Visitors often expected elegant offices, and luxurious surroundings worthy of an internationally celebrated inventor. Instead, they frequently found him dressed in simple working clothes, stained by oil, chemicals, or machine dust. He remained happiest beside crowded workbenches, discussing technical problems with assistants rather than attending formal celebrations in his honor. Recognition pleased him far less than discovery. Every solved problem simply encouraged him to search for another waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. His philosophy toward work became almost legendary. People occasionally asked how he managed to accomplish so much, while others produced comparatively little. His answer reflected years of experience rather than clever rhetoric. Inspiration mattered, he admitted, but inspiration alone accomplished almost nothing without relentless effort. Brilliant ideas visited many people. Persistence determined which ideas survived long enough to become reality. Countless hours spent testing, refining, correcting, and trying again separated dreams from inventions, while cities across the world slowly embraced electric light. Another transformation quietly unfolded inside the laboratory. Thomas no longer viewed invention as a collection of isolated projects. He had demonstrated that organized research, collaborative teamwork, disciplined experimentation, and practical manufacturing could consistently produce innovations capable of reshaping society. This model would influence generations of scientists and engineers long after individual inventions faded into history. Yet even as electric lights spread across continents, his restless imagination had already begun turning toward another mystery. People could now see farther into the night than ever before, but another human sense still remained untouched. If sound could be preserved and light could be controlled, perhaps moving images themselves might someday be captured, stored, and brought back to life. Once again, the impossible was quietly becoming another question waiting for an answer. The success of electric lighting transformed Thomas Edison into one of the most recognizable figures in the world. Newspapers eagerly reported his newest experiments. Visitors traveled from distant countries, hoping to meet the man whose inventions had begun reshaping modern life. Children learned his name in school. Businessmen sought partnerships. Governments requested demonstrations. To millions of people, he represented the extraordinary possibilities of a new technological age. Yet fame, impressive as it appeared from a distance, carried burdens that few outsiders fully understood. Every announcement attracted enormous public attention. Whenever rumors spread that Thomas had begun another ambitious project, journalists gathered outside his laboratory, searching for clues. Newspapers competed to publish stories predicting his next invention. Some reports celebrated genuine achievements. Others exaggerated unfinished ideas until imagination became confused with reality. Expectations grew so high that many people assumed he possessed almost supernatural abilities. They believed success followed him effortlessly, unaware of the countless disappointments hidden behind every celebrated breakthrough. Inside the laboratory, however, life remained remarkably familiar. Unfinished machines still covered workbenches. Notebooks continued filling with calculations and rough sketches. Experiments still failed, far more often than they succeeded. Despite worldwide admiration, scientific progress refused to become easier. Nature remained indifferent to reputation. Electrical circuits ignored. Newspaper headlines, chemical reactions paid no attention to public applause. Every new challenge demanded the same patience and discipline that had guided the curious boy experimenting inside his family's basement decades earlier. Among the many ideas occupying his attention, one seemed especially fascinating. Years before, the phonograph had preserved sound in a way previously considered impossible. Now, another question emerged with increasing persistence. Could movement itself somehow be captured? Could life be recorded so that future generations might witness people walking, laughing, working, or speaking long after those moments had passed? The thought appeared almost unbelievable. Yet, history had repeatedly taught Thomas that impossible ideas often deserve the closest examination. His team began exploring ways of photographing motion rather than single still images. The challenge proved enormously complex. One photograph froze, only an instant in time, creating the illusion of continuous movement. Required many carefully timed images displayed in rapid succession. Cameras, film, mechanical shutters, and viewing devices all demanded significant improvements before such a vision could become reality. Once again, invention required solving dozens of smaller problems before the larger dream could emerge. After years of experimentation, the laboratory developed important advances that eventually contributed to one of the earliest practical motion picture systems. Moving images, though primitive by modern standards, astonished audiences. People watched short scenes showing workers leaving buildings, athletes performing simple actions, or entertainers greeting the camera. The clips lasted only seconds, yet they revealed something extraordinary. Moments that had once vanished forever could now be experienced again. Memory itself seemed to acquire a physical form, although later generations would associate the motion picture industry with Hollywood rather than Menlo Park. These early experiments helped establish the technological foundations upon which an entirely new art form would eventually grow. Storytellers, educators, historians, and entertainers all benefited from the possibility of recording moving life itself. Few observers at the time could have predicted that future generations would spend countless hours watching films, documentaries, and television programs descended from these modest beginnings, while new inventions continued attracting attention. Competition within the electrical industry grew increasingly fierce. Ambitious entrepreneurs recognized the enormous financial opportunities created by expanding electrical systems. Rival companies promoted different technologies, each claiming superior safety and efficiency. Disagreements over electrical standards gradually intensified into what later became known as the War of the Currents. Although the technical details proved highly complex, the central question remained straightforward. Which type of electrical system would best power the future? Thomas strongly supported direct current, the system around which much of his own electrical network had been designed. Others, including several talented competitors, argued that alternating current offered important advantages, especially when transmitting electricity over long distances. The debate extended beyond engineering into business, politics, and public opinion. Newspapers eagerly reported every development. Demonstrations, advertisements, and heated arguments attempted to persuade governments and investors alike. History would eventually show that alternating current became the dominant method for large-scale electrical distribution because of its practical advantages over long distances. Yet, reducing this period to winners and losers oversimplifies a far more complicated reality. Without the pioneering work carried out by Thomas and his colleagues, the electrical industry itself might never have reached the point where such competition became possible. Progress often emerges, not because one individual possesses every correct answer, but because many determined people challenge one another to improve existing ideas. These years also revealed he could be remarkably stubborn when convinced of his own conclusions. Confidence, which had served him well throughout countless difficult experiments, sometimes made it challenging for him to recognize alternative approaches. Like every human being, he possessed strengths that occasionally became weaknesses when carried too far. His extraordinary determination inspired generations of inventors. Yet it could also lead to conflict with equally determined rivals, pursuing different visions of the future. Outside the laboratory, personal life brought both happiness and sorrow. His family shared moments of pride as his achievements gained worldwide recognition, yet they also experienced the consequences of his relentless devotion to work. Long hours inside laboratories inevitably meant fewer hours at home. Friends and relatives sometimes observed that his greatest love seemed to be invention itself. Balancing extraordinary ambition with ordinary family life proved no easier for him than for countless dedicated people throughout history. Despite advancing age, his curiosity never appeared to diminish. Visitors often found him examining new materials, discussing fresh experiments, or questioning younger engineers about recent discoveries. Success had not convinced him that learning was complete. If anything, each breakthrough revealed additional mysteries waiting beyond the horizon. The world continued changing, and he intended to keep exploring it for as long as strength allowed. Perhaps this restless curiosity explains why his influence extended far beyond the specific inventions carrying his name. Thousands of researchers who never met him adopted methods first demonstrated at Menlo Park. Organized industrial laboratories became common throughout the 20th century. Companies recognized that innovation could be cultivated systematically through teamwork, disciplined experimentation, careful documentation, and relentless persistence. In that sense, Thomas helped transform not only technology itself, but also the very process by which new technology came into existence. As the years passed, electric light spread across continents, recorded sound entered homes, motion pictures evolved into a global industry, factories operated with unprecedented efficiency, cities remained awake long after sunset, children grew up surrounded by inventions their grandparents would once have considered miracles. Gradually, society stopped thinking of these technologies as extraordinary. They simply became part of everyday life, woven so naturally into human existence that many people forgot someone had first imagined them. Yet, even the most remarkable careers eventually approached their final chapter. The laboratories continued buzzing with activity. Younger inventors carried new ideas into a rapidly changing century. Outside, the modern world that Thomas had helped illuminate expanded faster than anyone could have imagined. Meanwhile, the man whose restless curiosity had shaped so much of that transformation began slowing almost imperceptibly. Time, the one force no inventor could redesign, continued moving steadily forward toward a quiet autumn evening when America would prepare to say farewell to one of its greatest creators. By the early years of the 20th century, Thomas Edison had become something more than an inventor. He had become a living symbol of possibility. Newspapers no longer introduced him simply as the creator of remarkable machines. They described him as the man who had helped shape the modern world. Visitors from every corner of the globe continued arriving with the same quiet hope. Perhaps, if they stood inside his laboratory for a few moments, they might discover the secret behind his extraordinary imagination. Many left, surprised. They expected brilliance to appear dramatic, almost mystical. Instead, they found shelves crowded with tools, notebooks worn from constant use, unfinished experiments, and teams of ordinary people working patiently through difficult problems. There were no magical formulas hidden inside locked cabinets. There were only questions, careful observation, repeated testing, and an almost unbelievable willingness to continue after failure. The true mystery of Menlo Park had never been magic. It had always been persistence. As younger generations entered the scientific world, they naturally looked toward Thomas as a mentor. Even if they never met him personally, universities discussed his methods. Engineers studied his laboratories. Industrial companies adopted his approach of bringing together specialists from different disciplines under one roof. Instead of waiting for isolated geniuses to produce occasional breakthroughs, organizations began creating permanent research laboratories where innovation itself became part of everyday work. In many ways, this transformation proved just as influential as any individual invention bearing his name. Technology itself continued advancing at astonishing speed. Automobiles gradually replaced horse-drawn carriages. Airplanes began carrying daring pilots into the skies. Radio introduced voices that traveled invisibly across enormous distances. New scientific discoveries appeared almost every year, each building upon the achievements that had come before. Sometimes, people asked whether these rapid developments made earlier inventions seem less impressive. Thomas disagreed. Progress, he believed, resembled a staircase. Every generation climbed higher, only because someone else had first constructed the lower steps. Despite growing older, he refused to abandon experimentation. His hearing had declined even further, making conversations increasingly difficult. His eyesight occasionally troubled him. Long hours inside workshops no longer passed as effortlessly as they once had. Yet whenever strength permitted, he returned to laboratories filled with familiar sounds, the steady rhythm of machinery, the smell of warm metal, fresh wood, machine oil, and chemicals. These surroundings had accompanied him for most of his life. They felt less like workplaces than like home. Those who worked beside him noticed that his greatest satisfaction rarely came from public recognition. Medals, honorary degrees, ceremonies, and newspaper praise certainly pleased him, but only briefly. A difficult technical problem captured his attention far more completely. If someone introduced a new challenge that seemed impossible, his eyes often brightened with the same curiosity that had once inspired the young boy filling glass bottles inside a basement laboratory. Age had altered his appearance, but it had not extinguished the restless spirit that had guided him since childhood. He also became increasingly reflective about the nature of invention itself. Journalists frequently asked whether he considered himself unusually gifted. His answers often surprised them. He acknowledged the importance of imagination, yet he insisted that imagination alone accomplished very little without disciplined effort. Ideas arrived unexpectedly, sometimes during conversations, sometimes while walking, sometimes in complete silence. The real challenge began afterward. Transforming a fragile idea into reliable reality demanded patience, to measured not in hours, but in months and sometimes years. One of his most frequently quoted observations summarized this belief with remarkable simplicity. Genius, he famously remarked, consisted of 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. The sentence became celebrated because it captured a truth recognized by countless people beyond the scientific world. Artists, musicians, athletes, writers, teachers, and craftsmen all understood that extraordinary achievements rarely emerged from talent alone. Determination quietly performed most of the work, while inspiration merely pointed toward the destination. Although later historians have carefully examined some of the controversies surrounding his career, including business disputes, patent disagreements, and fierce competition with other inventors, those debates reveal another important lesson. Remarkable individuals are never entirely free from human imperfections. Thomas possessed exceptional vision, yet he also displayed stubbornness. He inspired loyalty, yet occasionally demanded exhausting levels of commitment from those around him. He transformed industries, yet sometimes underestimated the contributions of talented rivals. History becomes richer when greatness is understood alongside humanity rather than replacing it. Even so, the broader influence of his life's work remained undeniable. Electric light extended productive hours beyond sunset. Sound recording preserved voices that otherwise would have vanished forever. Motion picture technology laid foundations for one of the world's greatest forms of storytelling. Industrial research laboratories accelerated innovation across countless scientific fields. Millions of people who never heard his name still benefited every day from ideas that traced part of their history back to his relentless curiosity. During the autumn of 1931, his health gradually weakened. Years of tireless work had finally begun demanding their inevitable price. Family members gathered more frequently. Friends visited quietly. Newspapers published regular updates because people across the nation understood that they were witnessing the closing chapter of an extraordinary life. Businesses, schools, factories, and laboratories followed the reports with genuine concern. America was preparing to lose not only a famous inventor, but one of the defining figures of an entire era. On October 18th, 1931, Thomas Alva Edison passed away at his home in West Orange, New Jersey. He was 84 years old. News traveled rapidly across the world. Tributes appeared almost immediately. Presidents praised his achievements. Scientists honored his influence. Ordinary citizens remembered how electric light had transformed their homes. Teachers spoke about perseverance. Children repeated stories of the curious boy who refused to stop asking questions. Perhaps the most moving tribute came a few days later. Communities across the United States were invited to dim their electric lights briefly in his honor. For one quiet moment, countless homes, streets, factories, and buildings allowed darkness to return, acknowledging the man whose determination had helped push that darkness farther away than previous generations had ever believed possible. It was not complete silence, nor complete night. It was simply a pause, gentle and respectful, reminding the world that behind every ordinary convenience often stands an extraordinary human story. Today, more than a century after many of his greatest achievements, it is easy to forget how different life once looked. With a simple movement of a switch, light fills our homes. Voices recorded decades ago speak again. Moving images preserve moments that time itself cannot erase. These experiences feel so natural that we rarely stop to wonder where they began. Perhaps that is the greatest measure of true invention, when an idea changes everyday life so completely that future generations no longer notice it. The inventor has become part of history itself, and somewhere beyond every glowing light, every recorded voice, every moving image, and every curious child taking apart an old machine simply to discover how it works, the quiet spirit of Thomas Edison continues to whisper the same lesson that guided his remarkable journey from beginning to end. Never stop asking, why? Because the next question may illuminate the world. History often remembers remarkable people through a handful of famous achievements. One inventor gave the world electric light, another built the first airplane, another unlocked the mysteries of medicine. Over time, those simple descriptions become so familiar that they hide the far more extraordinary truth behind them. The inventions remain visible, while the countless failures, sacrifices, doubts, and ordinary moments that made those inventions possible slowly disappear from memory. Thomas Alva Edison's life reminds us that greatness rarely arrives as a sudden miracle. It grows quietly through habits, through curiosity that refuses to fade, through questions that refuse to accept easy answers, through the courage to begin again after disappointment. When he was a child, few people believed he possessed unusual promise. Teachers dismissed him as difficult to educate. His hearing gradually faded. Money remained scarce. His earliest laboratory burned inside a railway baggage car. Inventions failed. Employers dismissed him. Politicians rejected his first major device. Competitors challenged him. Critics questioned him. Countless experiments ended in broken glass, burned materials, exhausted workers, and another page filled with unsuccessful results. Viewed separately, each obstacle seemed capable of ending the story. Together, they became the foundation upon which history would eventually remember his name. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of his journey was not the light bulb itself, the phonograph, or the motion picture camera. It was the way he transformed failure into information. While many people interpreted unsuccessful attempts as evidence that a dream should be abandoned, Thomas interpreted them as evidence that another possibility still remained undiscovered. Every mistake narrowed the search. Every disappointment refined the question. Every obstacle quietly revealed another path forward. That philosophy reaches far beyond science. Every artist who tears up unfinished sketches, every writer who rewrites another chapter, every musician practicing the same difficult passage, every entrepreneur rebuilding after losing a business, every student struggling to understand a difficult lesson, every parent learning through trial and error. All of them walk a path surprisingly similar to the one traveled by the curious boy from Milan, Ohio. Progress has never belonged only to laboratories. It belongs wherever people refuse to let temporary failure become permanent defeat. Modern life surrounds us with inventions so familiar that they often become invisible. We wake beneath electric light. We listen to recorded voices from generations long gone. Till we watch moving images captured on the other side of the world. We communicate across continents in moments. Each convenience feels ordinary because someone else once devoted extraordinary effort to making it ordinary. Behind every simple switch, every recording, every screen, and every modern innovation stands a history built from relentless persistence rather than effortless brilliance. Thomas himself understood this better than anyone. He never claimed perfection. He never suggested that invention came easily. He never pretended that success belonged only to gifted individuals. Instead, his life quietly demonstrated that sustained curiosity can accomplish what natural talent alone often cannot. Intelligence opens the first door. Discipline carries us through every door that follows. Perhaps that explains why his story continues inspiring people more than a century after his passing. Technology changes. Machines become obsolete. New discoveries replace old ones. Yet the qualities that create meaningful progress remain remarkably unchanged. The willingness to ask difficult questions, the patience to continue searching, the humility to learn from mistakes, the courage to imagine a future that nobody else can yet see. Those qualities never grow old. They belong to every generation, willing to cultivate them. When America briefly dimmed its lights after his death in 1931, the gesture carried a beautiful symbolism. For a few quiet moments, millions of people paused to honor the man whose work had helped illuminate their homes, their cities, and their future. Darkness returned, only briefly, before light appeared once more. Perhaps that moment tells us something profound. Light was never meant to celebrate one man forever. It was meant to continue shining long after he was gone. That may be the greatest legacy any human being can hope to leave behind. Not simply achievements bearing a famous name, not monuments built from stone, not headlines preserved inside forgotten newspapers, but ideas that continue improving ordinary lives long after the inventor's own journey has ended. Today, somewhere in the world, a child is taking apart an old radio simply to understand how it works. Another is asking questions that adults cannot immediately answer. Someone else is staying awake late into the night, convinced that a difficult problem still has a solution waiting to be discovered. They may never become famous. They may never transform civilization. Or perhaps they will. History has taught us never to underestimate the quiet power of curiosity, because the future is almost always created by people who refuse to believe that today's limits must remain tomorrow's reality. And perhaps, if we listen carefully enough, the lasting message left behind by Thomas Edison is not hidden inside a museum, a laboratory, or even one of his famous inventions. It is found inside a simple invitation that remains as meaningful today as it was more than a century ago. Keep wondering, keep learning, keep trying, and never allow failure to have the final word. For somewhere beyond the next unanswered question may wait an idea capable of changing not only your own life, but the lives of generations still waiting to inherit the future.